Desert Storm, a dangerous low-level bombing mission from hell. January 15, 1991, Al Dhafra Air Base, United Arab Emirates. The sun hadn't yet broken over the desert horizon, and the cool morning air clung to the sand and steel of the base like a ghost refusing to let go. The wind was absent, eerily so, the silence only broken by the hum of generators and the distant whine of fighter jet engines warming up for their sorties. In the dim light of the mess hall, Captain Mike Blaze Donovan sat hunched over a cup of thick, bitter coffee that had been brewed far too long and too strong. He barely noticed the taste. It was routine now. Every pilot on the base lived inside a loop of muscle memory. Checklists, missions, maintenance, sleep, repeat. But something about this morning felt heavier. The air carried weight, and instinct, that ancient animal part of him, whispered from the back of his mind. Something's coming. He was 29 with over 1,000 hours in the cockpit of an F-16 Fighting Falcon, battle-hardened from exercises and close calls, but this was different. 2 weeks ago, Operation Desert Shield had transformed into Desert Storm. The waiting was over. The coalition had launched its offensive to liberate Kuwait and dismantle Saddam Hussein's military machine. Since then, the skies had been alive with fighters, bombers, AWACS, tankers, all moving pieces in a war-scale chessboard. Every hour brought new orders, new dangers. Donovan had flown 3 combat sorties already, each one a little further in, each one riskier than the last. But the one today? This was something else entirely. He stared up at the mission board, the red grease pencil markings fresh, names moving, targets shifting. Pilots stood around it quietly, exchanging nods and clipped words. No one laughed, no one joked. There was only tension, and that odd camaraderie that only forms when death is just a few hours away. Then, at precisely 0400 hours, the hammer dropped. Orders came in, this time hand-delivered by Lieutenant Colonel Maddox, the mission commander and a man whose presence alone could silence an entire hangar. Donovan rose to meet him along with 3 others, Captain Ray Rattler Jensen, Lieutenant Kyle Styx Morgan, and Major Elena Viper Soto. Maddox laid out the mission in cold, concise terms: a low-level strike into central Iraq. Target: an enemy airfield near Al-Taqadum, currently believed to be housing mobile Scud missile launchers. Intelligence suggested the site was temporary but operational. Every moment they delayed was another chance for those launchers to fire on coalition ground troops or even on Tel Aviv or Riyadh. The Scuds had to be taken out. No exceptions, no delays. This wasn't just about strategic strikes. It was about saving lives. "You'll be flying under radar coverage," Maddox said grimly, pointing to a map riddled with threat rings, missile sites, and early warning radars. "Altitude below 500 feet. You'll hug the terrain following all the way in. You're going through the belly of the beast. Expect heavy AAA, possible SAMs, and maybe even interceptors if you're unlucky. You're going in hot and coming out fast. Hit your target, get out, and pray the bastards miss." There was a pause in the room, long and suffocating. Everyone understood the subtext. This was a suicide run. The Iraqi air defenses around Al-Taqadum were among the most fortified in the country. Intelligence reports mentioned ZSU-23, 4 Shilkas, SA-6 and SA-2 surface-to-air missile batteries, shoulder-fired man-pads, and even hidden radar decoys to trick incoming aircraft. The terrain itself was flat, leaving little room to mask their movements. And flying that low at over 500 knots? One mistake, and you were a fireball. Donovan said nothing. He simply nodded. His mind was already transitioning into mission mode. Emotions muted, thoughts narrowed, his world shrinking to the dimensions of his cockpit. There was no room for fear now. Only precision, execution, survival. The 4 pilots prepped in silence. Final mission planning was fast, detailed, and brutal. Every inch of the ingress and egress route scrutinized. Fuel calculations were triple-checked. Weapons loadout was deadly. Each F-16 loaded with Mark 84 2,000-pound bombs, laser-guided and unguided munitions, and a full suite of countermeasures. The ground crews moved like machines, slapping on fuel tanks, mounting weapons, testing systems. Every rivet was accounted for, every system double-checked. No one spoke unless necessary. No one needed to. The gravity of the mission was written on every face. At 0530 hours, they stepped out to the tarmac. The desert was still dark, but the sky was beginning to lighten in the east, a blood-red haze forming on the horizon. Their jets sat in silence, sleek and cold, weapons glinting in the pre-dawn light. Donovan climbed into the cockpit of his bird, Falcon 207. As he settled into the seat and strapped in, the jet came alive. Avionics lit up. HUD flickered. The familiar growl of the GE engine hummed through his bones. This was home. Strange, but after so many hours in the air, this was the one place he felt in control. The flight launched just after 0600, each jet screaming down the runway and lifting into the cool dawn air. Once airborne, they dropped altitude fast, diving below radar coverage. The world flattened out, turning into a smear of beige and gray as they raced across the Iraqi desert at treetop level. Every bump in the terrain mattered. Every power line, every ridge, every structure was a potential threat. Donovan's hands were locked on the stick and throttle, eyes scanning constantly. His heart beat fast but steady. The adrenaline had taken over now. They crossed the border in silence. Radio chatter was minimal, encrypted and terse. AWACS confirmed enemy radar was pinging intermittently, but so far, no locks. They passed over small towns, herds of camels scattering below them in panic. Civilians unaware of the chaos screaming just above their rooftops. Then all hell broke loose. 5 miles from the target, the landscape erupted. Anti-aircraft tracers lit up the sky like fireworks, red and green arcs weaving death across their flight path. SAM warnings blared in Donovan's headset. His RWR screamed with lock tones. They jinked, flared, broke formation, each pilot flying like a demon just to stay alive. A missile streaked past Donovan's canopy, so close he felt the shockwave rattle his teeth. "Viper's hit!" came a shout over the comms. "She's trailing fuel but stable." Donovan didn't have time to respond. The target was dead ahead. He rolled into his final attack run, lined up the crosshairs, and dropped his payload. The bombs fell true, laser-guided and vengeful. Explosions tore through the airfield below, Scud launchers, fuel depots, and munitions going up in flaming chaos. "Splash, splash, direct hits," someone called. But there was no time to admire the work. The egress was worse. The Iraqis were fully awake now, and the skies turned into a killing zone. Donovan jinked left and right, dodging flak and heat-seeking missiles. His hands moved on instinct, every movement calculated but primal. Rattler took shrapnel but stayed airborne. Viper was bleeding hydraulics. Styx's jet was scorched but functional. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of chaos, they broke through, crossed the border. AWACS confirmed clear skies. The tension snapped like a cable. Donovan exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath for minutes. The radio came alive with exhausted voices. "Jesus," Styx muttered. "That was a meat grinder." "Yeah," Donovan replied, voice hoarse. "But we got it done." They returned to Al Dhafra with smoke-blackened jets and shaking legs. The ground crews cheered as they taxied in. Every return was a miracle. Donovan climbed out of the cockpit, heart still pounding, sweat soaking his flight suit. He looked up at the sky, blue and innocent now, and thought of the firestorm they'd flown through. He didn't say anything as he walked back to the barracks. He didn't need to. His face told the whole story. It had been a mission from hell, but they'd flown through it, and they'd made it back. Inside the mission tent, The world narrowed to red light and the steady hum of electronics. Outside, the sun was creeping toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the tarmac. But in here, time felt like it was slowing down, grinding under the weight of what was coming. A red combat lamp glowed above the heads of 4 pilots seated at a steel table, each man and woman leaning forward in grim silence, the air around them charged with the kind of energy that preceded something irrevocable. This wasn't just another sortie, it was the mission. The kind that got written up in intelligence reports. Or worse, in obituaries. The names were etched in patches, in dog-eared call signs worn like battle scars. Donovan, Blaze, sat stone-faced, hands folded, knuckles white. To his left was Major Elena Viper Soto, her dark eyes scanning the satellite feed projected on the wall like a hawk circling prey. Captain Rob Rooster Kessler leaned back slightly, chewing on a toothpick, jaw twitching, always the kind of guy who hid nerves behind swagger. And finally, the youngest of them, Lieutenant Jake Fang Morrison. Fresh-faced but sharp, with a twitchy energy that betrayed the adrenaline already coursing through his veins. At the head of the table stood Lieutenant Colonel Maddox, silhouetted against the projection screen. He didn't waste time. No motivational speeches, no bravado, just cold, clear facts. War didn't care about your feelings. It cared about physics, metal, fire, and whether or not you blinked first. The satellite image shifted, grainy infrared shots stitched together by recon birds and spy satellites. It showed the cracked expanse of desert terrain near Al-Taqadum, and in the middle of it, a web of hardened aircraft shelters, access, roads, camouflaged revetments. Overlaid on top were pulsing red dots, Intel's best guess at where the Scud mobile launchers were hiding. 2 confirmed launchers, possibly 4, tucked in beside the bunkers like wolves hiding in a sheep pen. Intel shows at least 2 batteries positioned near hardened shelters, Maddox said, tapping the screen with a laser pointer. We believe they're mobile and being moved every 6 to 8 hours, so this timing window is tight. If they move before you get there, the mission fails. These bastards could be parked outside Riyadh by tomorrow morning. That doesn't happen. Not on our watch. The screen shifted again. This time, a topographic map highlighting elevation, contour lines, ingress routes. You'll be flying in from the south. Terrain's rough. Low dunes, dry riverbeds, some ridge lines you can use for masking. Approach vectors tight. Altitude must remain at 200 feet or lower the entire time. You'll be under their radar net. Any higher and you're lit up like a Christmas tree. Radio silence until you break off. Radar emissions off. This is a blackout run. Donovan's eyes flicked to the route. It was almost surgical in its precision. No margin for error, just a hairline corridor threading between overlapping threat zones. One wrong turn, one burst of anti-air fire, and they'd be vapor. "What about SAMs?" Fang asked, his voice tight, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Everyone turned to look at Maddox, waiting for the bad news they already knew was coming. "They've got SA-2s in the sector," Maddox replied, eyes locked on the lieutenant. "Fixed batteries, long range, high altitude. Shouldn't touch you if you stay low, but we also expect SA-6s, mobile, more flexible. Their acquisition radars can find you if they're up and hunting. And if you're real lucky, you'll meet some of the new toys the Soviets slipped them before the wall fell. SA-8s. IR-guided crap they've mounted on trucks. Real piece of work." "Hell," Rooster muttered. Maddox ignored it. "If you're lit up, don't engage unless you have to. Speed is your best defense. Punch through, hit your target, and get the hell out. You've got one pass. No second runs. No heroics." He clicked to the final slide. Escape vectors. The egress was pre-calculated down to the second. Sharp bank west after bomb release, terrain-hugging retreat through a narrow canyon route before climbing back up to mid-level where AWACS would be waiting with air cover. F-15 Eagles would sweep the skies on station. But they couldn't follow them into the lowest altitudes. Down there, the four of them would be alone. AWACS and Eagles will cover your egress once you break low level, Maddox continued. But they can't hold your hand. They're not babysitters. You're going to be in the belly of the beast for about 6 minutes. That's 6 minutes where every Iraqi with a radar, a gun, or a shoulder-fired missile is going to be trying to kill you. No one spoke. Questions? Silence. Maddox nodded once. Good. You've got 20 minutes to suit up. Flight line's already hot. Godspeed. The tent emptied in seconds, red light casting long shadows as the four pilots stepped back into the dim blue-gray of the early morning. Outside, the base was already rumbling with motion. Trucks moving, loaders arming jets, crews shouting over roaring engines. The controlled chaos of war. Donovan walked in silence beside Viper, both of them glancing up as a pair of KC-135s banked overhead, lumbering through the sky like giants. The sun was bleeding into the horizon now, a thin smear of orange across a pale sky. He could feel the heat starting to rise through the soles of his boots, radiating off the tarmac. His mind drifted for the briefest moment, back to the photo he carried in the zippered pocket of his flight suit. A Polaroid from 6 months ago. Sarah standing on the porch of their home in Fort Walton Beach, holding her growing belly, laughing. The sunlight had caught in her hair that day, and he remembered thinking how lucky he was to have her. He hadn't seen her since deployment began. Letters were slow, calls shorter still. But her voice never left him. Nor did the image of their daughter, not yet born, already the anchor that held his soul in place. He rubbed the pocket now, like a talisman, a ritual. She was why he flew, why he survived. Rooster bumped him with a shoulder. "You good, Blaze?" Donovan nodded. "Yeah, just ready to do the job." "Hell of a way to earn a paycheck," Rooster muttered, pulling on his gloves. Fang was already jogging ahead, restless. Viper paused at the edge of the hangar, helmet under her arm, staring out at the row of F-16s gleaming under the early light. Her jet was armed to the teeth, bombs hanging like fangs beneath the wings. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked forward. No one said much as they suited up. Final checks, oxygen, HUDs, helmet seals. The ritual was automatic, sacred in its repetition. The crews worked in silence, too. No banter today. Everyone knew. This wasn't just another run. When Donovan climbed the ladder into the cockpit, he paused at the top, just for a moment, and looked out over the desert. It was still quiet. Too quiet, like the land itself was holding its breath. Then he dropped into his seat, strapped in, and let the cockpit close around him like armor. The briefing was over. Now came the war. 0630 hours. The desert was waking up. A thin haze shimmered above the sand, rippling like waves over the endless bone-colored expanse. The horizon glowed with a molten edge, the rising sun beginning its crawl into the pale sky, casting long shadows across Al Dhafra Air Base. A distant thud echoed as weapons crews locked final payloads in place. The scent of fuel and scorched metal hung in the air. And then the earth shook. 4 F-16 fighting falcons surged down the tarmac like predators unleashed from a cage. Their engines roared to life with an almost mythic ferocity, a primal scream of raw power and velocity. Vapor curled from the concrete beneath them. No ceremony, no fanfare, just precision. They rolled in tight formation, nose to tail, one after another, as ground crew waved their last salutes, the universal thumbs up of faith and farewell. These crews had watched dozens of missions launch, but this one felt different. Everyone knew the risk. Everyone felt the weight. Donovan's Falcon was second in line. He sat motionless in the cockpit, but his heart thudded like a war drum. HUD glowing, systems green, weapons armed. His right thumb hovered near the master arm switch. He flipped it on, a single click that shifted his world. Radar remained cold. They were flying dark, the terrain-following system whirred softly, locking onto topography, whispering telemetry like a ghost in his ear. "Blaze, Viper, Rooster, Fang, check in," came Viper's voice, crisp and steady. "All green," said Donovan. "Ready," Rooster echoed. "Let's get this done," Fang snapped. "Wheels up in 5. The lead jet thundered down the runway and lifted off, wings cutting through the morning air like blades. Then the second. Donovan pushed the throttle to the stops, afterburners igniting with a boom that cracked the sky, catapulting him forward. The G's pressed him into the seat. Ground fell away. The desert unfurled below like a giant canvas of dust and sun-bleached scars. Behind him, Rooster and Fang joined formation, 4 birds climbing fast, banking east, then slicing north, straight toward enemy territory. At 30 miles out, they dipped low. No more high-level cruise, no more comfort. Now it was treetop flying. The F-16s hugged the terrain, chasing the folds and ripples of the Iraqi desert like hawks riding thermals. Every dune, every wadi, every ridgeline was a potential shield or death trap. The terrain-following radar beeped in a rhythmic pulse, mapping safe passage, whispering adjustments to pitch and roll. Donovan trusted it with his life. The horizon grew flatter, the sun now a blinding orb to the rear, casting their shadows long across the sand. Below radar, below mercy, just the scream of turbines and the crackle of tension. 100 miles into Iraqi airspace, the silence shattered. "Bandit radar spike, 2 o'clock," Rooster barked over comms. Donovan's blood turned to ice. The RWR-radar warning receiver lit up with a sharp ping, a solid tone, a lock. "Jammer on! Brake left!" Viper shouted. Donovan flicked his switch, and the ECM pod on his wingtip fired into action, screaming electronic noise into the ether. He rolled hard left, pulling G's that crushed his chest. The formation scattered, each pilot executing their own evasive maneuver, the practiced ballet of pilots dancing with death. Then the sky behind them flashed. "Missile, missile! Flares now!" Fang yelled, panicked but sharp. Donovan's fingers flew. He slammed the flare release. Magnesium decoys blasted from his tail in a blinding cascade, dozens of fiery stars trailing behind, a blizzard of heat and light meant to fool the hunter. He didn't see the missile, but he felt it. The rumble, the sound of air ripping itself apart. Then, boom. A shockwave rolled over the Falcon. The missile detonated in the wake behind them, the white-hot warhead tearing a blossom of flame into the sky. Shrapnel spun outward, harmless this time, but close. Too close. "Jesus," Donovan muttered, his breathing shallow, every nerve firing like he'd touched lightning. "That was close," Viper said, her voice lower, more measured now, but even she couldn't hide the tremor. "Say 6, Rooster added, panting. "They saw us. They're watching." "Keep low," Donovan ordered. "Stick to the valleys. Don't give them a second shot." They reformed quickly. No time to dwell. The valley ahead beckoned, carved into the desert like a scar. Each jet dipped into its shadow, turbines howling against canyon walls. They were flying fast, just over 600 knots, mere feet from the ground. Dust kicked up in their wake. Every bump, every gust of wind jostled their jets like toys in a storm. Donovan checked his displays. Everything was holding, no damage. But his sweat was pouring now, soaking the lining of his helmet. The pressure didn't let up. Not for a second. "AWACS reports second radar ping, farther north," Viper said. "Another SA battery. Not tracking us yet." "They will," Rooster replied. "They've probably got the whole region lit up like a grid, just waiting." "No chatter from air patrols," Fang noted. "No MiGs." "They're out there," Donovan said. "They're always out there." The 4 Falcons continued their run, weaving through terrain like phantoms. The radio chatter died down. Each pilot sank into the zone, that narrow place between life and death, where muscle memory and instinct took over. Altimeter ticking, airspeed rising. The desert whipped past in a blur. Donovan's mind flicked back to the briefing, the layout of the airfield, the suspected Scud positions, the shelters disguised to look empty, but camo netting didn't hide heat signatures. Intel had been sure. These were launch-ready units, maybe even carrying chemical warheads. His jaw clenched. This was why they were here. This was what all the training, all the fear, all the risk was for. "Crossing target threshold in 30 seconds, Viper said. "Copy," Donovan replied. "Arm weapons." He flipped the final switch. The bomb release went hot. The Falcon was now a loaded gun. He reached into his suit for half a second, brushing the edge of the photo tucked in the chest pocket. Sarah, their baby, just a few weeks to go now. He focused. "Eyes up," he said. "Let's hit them hard." The airfield was just ahead, and hell was waiting. The target emerged from the haze like a phantom rising out of the sand. Sprawled across the flat Iraqi plain, the airfield was a skeletal sprawl of concrete, camouflaged nets, hardened shelters, and ghostly shapes of military hardware. From altitude, it might have looked like an innocuous collection of sand-colored mounds and runways. But at 150 feet, screaming in low with death on their wings, the truth could no longer hide. It was a hornet's nest, fuel trucks, radar dishes, mobile trailers, and tucked between them, unmistakable silhouettes, Scud launchers. Donovan's voice cut through the comms, taut and steady. "Target visual. Weapons free. Blaze, your lead." He didn't acknowledge. He didn't have to. His gloved thumb hovered for a split second, then pressed the master arm. His HUD blinked. Bombs hot. 4 Mackay 84 2,000-pounders, laser-guided, dumb iron with brains and rage. He gripped the stick tighter, felt the sweat rolling under his helmet, heard the whine of the terrain-following radar ease off as he manually lined up the attack vector. No tech could make this perfect. It was down to nerve now. The wind screamed past the canopy. His Falcon skimmed across the plain like a stone skipping over water. At 150 feet, the world was a blur of brown and heat shimmer. He could see the ground crews running now, Iraqis scrambling like ants, some diving for cover, others just staring up in stunned disbelief. Too late to shoot. Too late to run. He was already there. Then the sky erupted. Anti-aircraft fire opened up from 3 directions at once. From behind a revetment, twin ZSU-23-4 Shilka barrels rotated up and spat a stream of tracers that slashed through the air like a curtain of burning steel. Black puffs burst all around as 57mm shells exploded mid-air. More tracers, red and white, laced the sky in wild arcs. The airspace above the target was a living storm of flak and fire. "AAA, 10 o'clock low," Viper called out. "Shilka's hot." "Hold steady," Donovan said, voice calm despite the chaos. "One run. Make it count." He dropped altitude even further, down to just under 100 feet. The Falcon bucked slightly and the turbulence kicked up from the shock waves of AAA bursts. A piece of hot metal pinged off the left side of his intake cowling. Just noise now. No room for fear. Only control. His HUD painted the first Scud launcher in a green targeting square. The laser seeker locked on. The range countdown ticked down fast. 3, 2. "Bombs away!" Donovan felt the sudden release. 4 MiG-84s dropped in a staggered ripple, slicing downward on whispering fins. The jet lurched lighter as they fell away, and he punched the throttle, yanked the stick into a low left bank, and poured on speed, pulling G's that pressed him deep into his seat. His eyes never left the ground, even as it all went to hell. The first impact was instant, an eruption of dirt and fire that swallowed the center of the launch site in a wall of flame. The second bomb hit a fuel truck. An orange fireball ripped skyward with a concussion that rattled his ribs. The third clipped a radar array, shearing it in half. The fourth landed dead center on the Scud. It went up like the 4th of July. "Direct hit! Good effect!" Rooster yelled, breathless, awe and adrenaline mixing in his voice. Donovan didn't answer. He was already climbing slightly, eyes scanning for the next threat. But in his mirror he saw it. Black smoke curling into the sky, the twisted, burning carcass of the launcher smoldering in a crater, flames licking over the skeletal remains of nearby vehicles. Then Viper was in. Her Falcon screamed overhead and nosed down fast. More AAA guns opened up, some fixed, others wheeled out into the open, firing blindly. But she was too fast, too low. "Pickle," she called. Her bombs fell clean. Donovan watched her glide through the inferno she'd just created, secondary detonations following her as more vehicles exploded in chain reaction. One looked like a command trailer, its comms mast vaporized in a burst of white-hot shrapnel. Ammunition inside cooked off in a staccato burst. Another Scud launcher, burning, twisted, leaking fuel, then gone in a flash. "2 targets down," Viper reported. "Pulling out west." "Copy," Donovan said, angling wide to cover. Rooster was next. "Rolling in." His approach was low and fast, his targeting square drifting slightly. Winds were stronger at low altitude, but he adjusted with smooth grace and delivered his payload with precision. The bombs carved a path across the southern section of the airfield. One landed just short of a hardened shelter, and the resulting blast shredded its blast doors. Fire spilled out. Another hit a truck column, more secondary blasts. The concussive force rattled Donovan's Falcon even from a mile away. Fang dove in hard. His voice over comms was tight but focused. "In hot." More 8AA met him. One gun emplacement almost nailed him mid-pass, sending a stream of tracers just above his right wing. But he never wavered. His Falcon dropped in low and loosed its bombs, clipping the northern edge of the field. One of his Mark 84s buried itself into a taxiing Scud launcher and tore it apart from the inside out. The jet of flame that followed reached 30 feet high. "That's 3 launchers down," Donovan barked, scanning the field. The airfield was a furnace. Flames rippled across the tarmac, black smoke trailing into the sky in thick columns. Craters pockmarked the ground. Vehicles burned in every direction. The radar dish was gone. Power lines crackled. The control tower, barely visible under camo netting, was now leaning sideways, blasted at the base. Still, the Iraqis fired. More tracers arced up, mostly blind now, undirected chaos. One gun tried to track Donovan again as he circled for rejoin. He jinked left, rolled right, and gave it full throttle, feeling the afterburner kick in like a hammer. "Everyone clear?" Viper called. "Blaze clear." "Rooster clear." "Fang." There was a pause. "Clear. I'm good. Took some heat, but no hits." "Egress vector now," Donovan said. "Follow the canyon north, then hard west. Let's move." The formation reformed low, flying nap of the earth through the fractured light of early morning. Behind them, the fireball lit up the sky like a rising sun. Their shadows flickered across the hills, racing ahead. Donovan looked once over his shoulder, eyes narrowed behind his visor. The airfield was nearly gone, eaten alive by flame and fury. He said nothing. The mission wasn't done, not until they were home. Hell breaks loose. Just as the last bomb hit, a radar lock tone screamed in Donovan's headset. "Sam launch! Multiple exclamation mark! Break, break!" 3 missiles rose like dragons. One exploded behind Fang's jet. I'm hit! I'm hit! Mayday, this is Fang! Engine failure!" Donovan watched in horror as Fang's F-16 trailed smoke. He heard his friend's strained voice. "Ejecting! See you on the ground, brothers!" A parachute bloomed below. "Godspeed, Fang," Donovan muttered. He yanked the stick, weaving between missiles, flares bursting behind him. Another explosion shook the sky. The jet shuddered. "Warning! Hydraulic failure!" blinked the console. "Come on, baby! Hold together!" The long way home. The F-16 limped south. Rooster flew beside him, wings level. "You leaking fuel?" We need to get you out fast. AWACS directed them toward a tanker. Mid-air refueling was their only chance. Donovan approached the KC-135 tanker with a trembling jet and gritted teeth. The refueling boom connected, a jolt, fuel flowed. We got you, Blaze. Hang on. Minutes later, the airbase came into view. Donovan made a shaky landing, tires screeching, brake smoke billowing. The jet stopped. Silence. Then cheers from ground crew. He climbed down. Knees buckled. But he was alive. Aftermath Fang was rescued 2 days later by a special ops team. He had broken ribs and a bullet wound, but he survived. The Scud site? Gone. Intelligence confirmed it had hosted launchers aimed at Riyadh. Donovan received the Distinguished Flying Cross, but he never wore it. I didn't fly for medals, he told a reporter. I flew for the guy next to me, and for the people back home. Years later, he sat with his daughter, showing her a picture of the F-16 he flew. Was it scary, Daddy? He paused. Yes, but I wasn't alone. Epilogue. The fire and the silence operation. Desert Storm ended weeks later. A victory, they said. But for the men who flew through hell, it was more than that. It was a story of brotherhood, sacrifice, fear, and survival. It was war. And war, as Donovan knew, was never just black and white. It was the red of flares, the orange of fire, the blue of the sky, and the silence that follows when it all ends.